A whole show dedicated to the high cost of education and the extremely low return. A conversation with Alex Newman about a story we did a few weeks ago, how a school is doubling down on trying to discipline or fire an adult male who would not watch a young girl shower, and why Dr. Duke was a bouncer in his previous life. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Every week we cover those stories that impact K-12 classrooms and college campuses across the nation. Greetings to all of our committed listeners, and if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Never ever miss an episode. Later on in the episode, we're going to be talking to our international journalist, Alex Newman, with an update on a story we first covered a few weeks ago in Florida, where a male teacher refused to watch a girl shower in the boys' locker room. Now it appears the school is out for blood, doubling down, threatening to destroy his career because he didn't follow their sick orders. So stick around for that. But first, I want to bring in Katie Petrick of the Healthy Republic for our top education stories of the week. Katie.
We are in the holiday season. It's officially that time of year. So we had Black Friday, we had Cyber Monday. You've probably spent hundreds of dollars buying me awesome presents.
Hundreds?
Thousands?
How cheap do you think we are?
Thousands. Oh,
Thousands.
Well, we're going to apply that today to education. How is it that we spend money in education in America? And we want to be succinct in our explanation. So there's a chart that's been out there for years now. It's actually a chart from May 2013. It's from the Cato Institute. It was done by Andrew Coulson. And it basically uses data from the Department of Education to tell us how money is being spent in public schooling since 1970 and what the results are. And if you just look at that chart, you can see a whole lot of money with not a whole lot of return.
Yeah, that rising blue line is interesting because that's how much the spending's gone up in 40, 50 years. And you can see everything is more or less flatline dull, flatline dead. And it's gotten worse over the last couple of years. This is the holiday season, which means it's the season we spend a lot of money on stuff that we're only going to pay attention to for a couple weeks. But this is your kid's education. And the theme of our entire show today is going to be just how much money, how much resources we are committing to your kids' schools, and how little return you're getting. The argument that your kids need more money, the argument that your schools, your teachers, your public school system needs more money to provide higher quality education is utter rot gut. It's a complete scam. We are paying lots and lots of money that is not going to your kids' education. This is being used to pay off textbook companies like Pearson, who's putting in Common Core themed curriculum in your schools. This is the big testing organizations that are doing all this data gathering on your kids. They're reaping the money. Teachers unions are reaping this money. This has very little to do with ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, and yet when you throw that chart up again, Mike, look at the numbers there. They're really pretty staggering from Cato. You've got you've got the solid blue line that comes up, as I mentioned before. The green line is math scores, where math scores stay stagnant. Reading scores dip, dip, dip. This is unbelievable when you think about what we're committing here. And I want you to think about this, Mom and Dad. Next time, because it's going to happen every fall, next time your public school puts up a referendum wanting another $1.2 million, wanting another $30, $40 million to build this add-on to the public school, is it really necessary? Do we really need better sports complexes in our public schools? Do we really need all of this money for renovation when our kids cannot do the basic functions of education? When they can't read very well, they don't do math at a high level, they're not prepared for college, they're certainly not prepared for careers. Why are we spending this kind of money on a system that's this bad? And how much money would we save if we came up with better alternatives in public schools?
Yeah, and the thing is, in 2015, we have some data that shows, we're all about being a globalist nation now. We want to, how do we compare around the globe? And we're really quite pathetic with it because the Program for International Student Assessment, again, 2015, they found when they tested 15-year-olds across the board, across the whole world, the United States ranked 24th in reading, 25th in science, and 40th in math. So all this money that we're dumping into our school system clearly is not working.
No, and these statistical analysis that they do are they're worse when you stop and think about most of the surveys don't include third world nations. Most of the time, what's being measured are first world countries, right? Countries with reasonable stability, reasonable educational commitment. When you look at it that way, America's at the bottom pile of all the first world nations in all the categories that really matter. Why are we spending this much more money on it? We have federalized education. We have centralized education. We have centralized, nationalized the testing of our kids. Common Core paid off on its lousy promise. We're going to make all of our kids the same kid. Can't do it by making them better, but you can get 60 million American kids, school kids, to be the same children if you set the bar really, really low. And spend a lot of money for what exactly? The South Koreans are almost at the top of everything. And they spend a fraction of what we spend on every kid every year. And those kids turn out to be the highest performing kids in math and science. And so it's one of those things where where is the common sense fiscal reality here? I was talking to my producer, Mike. They had a huge referendum this last November. Was $40 million. They wanted to put all these extras on to the local public school. And the town just voted for it, right? All this extra property taxes, all this glitz and glamour, better facilities, better looking buildings, all of this green space, all of this stuff that has nothing to do with the reason we send our kids to school, and they passed it right through. This is happening all across the country.
Yeah, referendums tend to be put in during either midterm elections or, kind of spring elections where pretty much no one is there. And I wrote a column years ago now when my home district was up for a referendum. And the column talked about how it took 24 votes, or it was either 24 votes or 26 votes made the difference for either 24 or 26 million dollars. I forget which the number is, but that's exactly what happened. So they passed, and they got a new football field, a soccer complex, and like all these things. It's not helping the kids in their actual education.
Yeah, let me say this because it's really, really important. If we have reached a crossroads in American education, American culture generally, but in education in specific, we have reached a crossroads. The transformation of our kids' public school education away from a merit-based, educational, knowledge-based system has been completed now. What we have instead now is a in loco parentis organization, a group of basically high school, elementary, middle school teachers with little more than 4-year degrees, typical 4-year college degrees, are now playing sociologist to your children, now playing psychologist to your children, now playing parent to your children, now playing sex therapist to your children, now playing gay and transgender counselor to your children. All of that takes radical priority over actually teaching your kids the basic tools that they need to become educated citizens in this country. That transition is complete now, and we at the state, local, and federal level are spending more and more money to infiltrate and to override what parents are sending their kids to school for.
And we're actually spending, inflation adjusted, since World War II, 663% more per pupil. And we have a case study out of New York, which the state of New York is spending more than $22,000 per student. Take that in, $22,000 per student. This is even according to the most recent U.S. Census Bureau data, which is actually from 2016, so it could be more. But the money is clearly not equaling any good results, as we knew what happened. The state is ranked 9th overall in the nation, so there are 8 schools doing better with less money. And only 31% of their 8th graders are proficient in math. Only 32.8% of their students are proficient in reading. And the kicker is the governor, Andrew Cuomo, in a budget address in January, actually said, right now we actually have no idea where the money is going. So they don't even know what's happening with this money that they are putting out there, that the taxpayers are having to spend.
Sounds like New York, but this is not just New York. If you're in red state America, if you're in flyover country and you think your schools are immune, I am really sick to death of this argument that I hear all across the country. Well, we all know that the public schools are bad. We're pouring money down a rat hole. We're flushing taxpayer dollars down the toilet, that our kids really can't read. They're not even reading books. They're not bringing books home with them anymore. We know this is true, and yet the argument that we get all the time is, well, my kid's school's great. I play pinochle on Saturday nights with my kid's math teacher, and she's just a honey, right? She would never do anything bad to these kids. This is the kind of normalcy bias that is destroying our country. There was a poll done a few years ago where something like 80% of moms and dads across the country admitted that the public school system was broken, but only like 21% actually thought their school was bad. That just shows you how bad we've been educating people for math for a long time when parents can't figure that out either.
All right, so we have another case study, actually. It affects our own home state of Wisconsin, because in Wisconsin, it's something really interesting to watch. So in the most recent election, Governor Scott Walker was defeated by Tony Evers, who's the current Department of Public Instruction superintendent. So now you have an education-minded, again, air quotes, education-minded new governor coming in. So what do you think he's going to obviously do with as governor. So now Scott Walker, who is known as being the one who basically, took down teacher unions, got rid of the collective bargaining, is out, and we have Tony Evers in. And the Wisconsin Policy Forum found that Wisconsin is going to need an additional $2.2 billion over the next 2 years to continue its existing programs. And this is including already a $621 million increase in education specifically. But Tony Evers has said that he wants $1.4 billion in addition to what they already get.
Tony Evers has been the Secretary of Education in Wisconsin since the time of Moses. He oversaw the bringing in of Common Core. He destroyed Wisconsin public schools. Wisconsin public schools used to be one of the better school systems in the entire country. And yet with Tony Evers back in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, they brought in Common Core, didn't consult anyone in the state. Meantime, we had Governor Scott Walker who got elected after Evers brought Common Core into the state. And for the life of me, no one in Wisconsin has been able to figure out why the Republicans who owned the Assembly, the Senate, and the Supreme Court in Wisconsin didn't take on Tony Evers in the Department of Education more stridently. Pretty much everything that Evers asked for, the Republicans gave them. Scott Walker gave them. Scott Walker, when the Republicans ran conservative candidates for the DPI here, the Department of Public Instruction, the Republicans in Wisconsin would not get behind the Republican candidates and backed Tony Evers. So now, Governor Scott Walker lost his election to the DPI secretary by a handful of votes, primarily by not willing to risk confronting Evers. We had a Republican establishment in the state for the last 8 years that basically gave the Democrats and gave Evers everything they wanted. Now Governor Walker lost his job so that Tony Evers could be the governor in this state. So Wisconsin is beyond stupid with this. The more Tony Evers breaks education, the more he demands in terms of taxpayer money, the higher we promote him. This is what happens in the Democrat Party, by the way. Once Tony Evers is done he's already done wrecking Wisconsin schools. Now he's going to wreck Wisconsin's overall budget, wreck the state of Wisconsin. I can't think of a better 2020 candidate for the progressive left than Tony Evers. Tony Evers, failing along the way, that could be his motto. Let him destroy American public schools even more than he's destroyed Wisconsin public schools. And the question becomes again, $1.2 billion he wants, right, for Wisconsin public schools. $4 billion.
$1.4 billion.
$1.4 billion he wants for Wisconsin.
Even more.
Right. And we've given him how much? And the federal government has given Wisconsin how much? The race to the top to do this to our schools? And our kids, you saw New York. New York spending $22K a year on each student to get 32% proficiency for 8th grade kids. In Wisconsin, it's 35%. So we're spending less money than New York, but our results are effectively the same under the guidance of Tony Evers. There's your new governor, Wisconsin. Let's just hope that we see a Evers ticket in 2020. Let him do to the entire country what he's done to Wisconsin.
He's Monty Burns in my book.
And he looks just like Montgomery Burns, right? But the only difference between Montgomery Burns of The Simpsons and Tony Evers is Montgomery Burns actually earned his own money, right? He actually got rich on his own initiative, not sucking at the public teat.
All right, let's hit the college campuses because, and this is something I always was curious about, and it's kind of fun to actually find out the statistics. There are 10 colleges out there in the U.S. that are making nearly $38 million off rejecting people into their programs. So the LendEdu used data from the National Center for Education Statistics, an integrated post-secondary educational data system, so look that up, and they ranked the top 500 universities that made the most money off of actually rejecting people who wanted to come to their university. These applications, when you apply to college, can be $20 to up to $150.
Yeah, I was going to say $20 is
it's on there, but it's very few. Most of them are in the $50 to $90 range or something. And not shocking in the least, to me at least, is that the University of California system had 6 of the top 10 universities, so they're making the most money. And UCLA made $5.57 million off of saying, no, you cannot come to our university.
Simply for rejecting kids. This shows you with a scam. This is why it really is a good time of year to be doing the they're screwing you financially over and over again segment of the show. Because they're making money on so many aspects of this. I guarantee you this is cheap. The $5-something million they made just by rejecting kids. You got to pay this fee for us to spend at 20 minutes going over your application and telling you no. Right? And what are you really paying for, that $5 million? You're paying for diversity officer after diversity officer, affirmative action officer after affirmative action officer, trying to determine what your race is and sticking you in a file. I was teaching at a small school in Tennessee back in the late 1990s. I kid you not on this. And there was a African-American woman who was in charge of the affirmative action office. And we would get applications in for jobs. We were hiring for a professor in our department. And she was adamant, right, that we're not hiring any white people, right? We're going to hire black, we're going to hire minorities. That's what you do when you hire diversity officers. That's all they're charged in doing, is decreasing the surplus white population. So I'll never forget it. She was going through applications. We were on the committee. And she insisted that this one candidate was black. She did African-American lit, and she had an interesting sounding name. And so this African-American affirmative action director insisted that this candidate was black. Those of us who have been teaching for a lot of years, we said to her, no, look at all of her organizations, look at her background. She's clearly white, not black. And this affirmative action director, not believing us, she actually called this woman's office partner at her university. She was a graduate student, and asked the partner in the office, hey, is the girl who sits next to you in your office, is she white or black? At which point the stunned graduate student at this university said, well, she's white. At which point the affirmative action director, illegally I might add, hung up the phone and threw the application in the trash. That's what you're spending your money for, UC Berkeley, people applying to UCLA. You're spending money for out-of-control affirmative action directors to go racial hunting, head hunting, quota hunting. And this is federally illegal. It's illegal federally to play those kind of games. To call up somebody's office mate to ascertain their race so you can eliminate them from a candidate file, that's what's going on in these situations right here.
And just as a little FYI, 62 of those 500 universities made $1 million or more.
$1 million or more off your kids applying. And as just a cursory glance at the list that Mike had up shows that all your Ivy League schools are prominently represented. The gold standard universities, the ones that have, 20, 30, 40 billion dollars of endowment are making tens of millions of dollars off your kids every year just because of their applications. Again, keep in mind here that your kids, find a clever way to do this. I've been kind of half-heartedly joking about this. Your kids are going to have a much harder time getting in if they're white. So why not, and as we now know, Asian. If your kids are Asian and high achieving at Harvard, they're going to be discriminated against by the very progressives who claim tolerance. Start checking every box on the list. You are gay, you are transgender, you have sex with dogs. You go all the way down the list of all the fetishized progressive protected classes, because they don't dare ask you. If they call you up and is it really true that you're a transgender animal lover? And you say, yes, it is, and they say, prove it, you sue their asses, because they will not be able to come after you that way. The minute they question you, they've set up a system, right, where you're not allowed to question whatever anybody says they are. Again, if I were you, if we had a nation where every kid applying to college checked every single box, we could short-circuit this nonsense right away. Something to think about.
We'll see what happens. I guess that's some sage advice. Well, we have a story from SIUC. So it's the Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, the Young Democratic Socialists of America. That's great. Their chapter.
I love the fact that they're too stupid to know that Democrat and socialist in the same sentence is an oxymoron. They're too foolish to figure that out.
Yeah.
College education.
Anyway, they made a petition because they believe that SIUC should be tuition free. They launched this petition on change.org, because that's what we do now. We just make petitions for everything. That's as lazy as, or I guess as active as we are, because we're that lazy. But they launched a petition wanting college to be free, and so far a whole 422 people have signed this petition. And the actual very first paragraph, I'm going to read it word for word. The high of cost of tuition is directly causing lower enrollment at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. This hurts SIU students, university employees, and the Carbondale community. And I say certainly a lack of grammar studies is hurting SIU students.
Grammar's racist.
Oh, it is. And so they actually held a little press conference to promote the petition. you found out about it via Facebook. And the event stated that the need for comprehensive tuition reduction is critical now as the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and Eastern Illinois University both announced tuition-free plans aimed at students with family incomes below $61,000. So if you're from Illinois and you've heard about this, they've been wanting to get this on the books at various universities for years. SIUC competes directly with both universities, especially Eastern Illinois University, for these students at admissions time. And so I took a look also, by the way, SIUC has rejected $85,000 worth of applications, just as a little side note. But they're saying, and there's students that they quoted saying that, well, if you make tuition free, then it's eventually going to help our local economy and it's going to do wonders.
Yeah,
for
you
the
make
world.
Everything free. No one has to pay for it. Think about this.
Brilliant.
This is absolutely what our college kids and our college professors are teaching our college kids. If you just make everything free, healthcare free, housing free, college tuition free, just make it all free. Think about how much money you're going to have left, Katie, to spend on things like college tuition the idea that the economic, well, and we've talked about, how many times have we talked about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on this show? Here's a graduate from a major university in Massachusetts, Boston, with a degree in economics and international affairs, who cannot come up with a single argument about how she's going to pay for any of this stuff. Make it all free, and does the article go into, and I'm dying to hear this, does the article go into any detail about how once you make it free, it's going to stimulate the economy?
Oh, no. It just says,
No,
well,
of course not.
it will be, because that's it. Like, there's absolutely nothing added on it.
Because you're not spending the money on your kids' tuition, you're going to stimulate the... And by the way, how do you square that with socialism? Socialists who don't like people having more money to spend, socialists who think the government own all the money. How do you think that's going to work when you're not having to pay for health care, you're not having to pay for college tuition, you're not going to have to pay for anything, right? It's rent allowance, it's all free. No one should have to pay for the utility bills, it's all free. On the other hand, you're actually going to argue that it's going to stimulate the economy, because how ignorant are these kids not to know that that money isn't going to be kept by mom and dad. That money is going to be paid in taxes to the government from mom and dad to pay for all the so-called freebies you think you're getting.
Yeah, well, and we learned this is the thought pattern of, the 18 to 29-year-olds. And Harvard Kennedy School, the Institute of Politics, confirmed this with the fall 2018 National Youth Poll they did. And I have 3 facts that I want us to go through. They support tuition-free college. They support Medicare for all. And a federal jobs guarantee. So we'll start with the federal jobs guarantee. 56% of those surveyed say that a federal jobs guarantee would provide funding so that every American would be guaranteed a job paying at least $15 an hour and offering paid family sick leave and health benefits.
Mandatory federal employment. So what's going to happen when kids graduate and the only places that can afford, by mandate, are allowed to hire them are the federal government? If you're a kid graduating from college, right? Where are you going to end up? You're going to end up in a mandatory federal application process, because you can't lose. Everybody, this is literally what they want. They want every person in America to have a federal job, even if that federal job doesn't do anything, so that they can get a minimum of $15 an hour pay and all their health care paid for. And on top of the health care that they get free, they want free Medicaid, right? Medicare for everybody.
Well, I'll get to that in a minute.
We'll get that in a minute. And so, you see this. The problem is that in the 1960s, when you had kids making these kind of demands, sooner or later, somewhere they had to encounter real economics in school. Sooner or later, kids would see that this sounds good, but here's the historical, cultural, economic, and philosophical reasons why it won't work. The problem now, 50 years later, is no one's teaching them the other side. They're getting the same tired, warmed-over Marxist arguments that they've heard for 150 years now. But no one now is adult enough. None of these professors, none of these universities are adult enough now to sit these kids down and show them the tortured, bloody history of socialism, to explain to them philosophically how these kinds of freebies and set-asides and larger government control destroy liberty and independence. No one's economically going to sit down and explain to them how the numbers don't work, and they have never worked. When Ocasio-Cortez said that free Medicare for all is going to cost $34 trillion, and she was asked, how are you going to pay for it? Her response was, A, you just pay for it, and B, you haven't earned the right to ask me that question yet, der Kommissar said. 29 years old, in Congress, New York, $22,000 a year, paid for each student. It all seems to fall back on you, New York, the big apple my ass.
All right. Well, That's true. The thing I guess I always get stuck on when it comes to how much we're going to pay, like minimum wage and setting something up, the $15 an hour. Can someone please explain to me, why is it not $14 an hour? Why is it not $16 an hour? Why is it not $52 an hour?
You haven't earned the right to ask me that.
Exactly. I haven't.
And $15 an hour is a foot in the door number. The minute you give them $15 an hour, well, these are federal jobs. You can't have federal employees making $15 an hour when postmen are making this and when DMV people are making that. And when, right, you watch then you're going to have to regularize federal pay at a high level, right, in the interest of equity. This is a camel's nose. The entire humpity hump of the camel is under the tent, and the camel's ravaging around in your produce inside the tent now. Socialism is here. It's upon us. The younger generations don't know what the word means. They simply believe it means fairness. These college kids are not getting an education that at the very least would show them there are two sides to the socialist question. All they're being taught is everything wrong with their lives is blamable on free markets and capitalism, and everything would be perfectly utopian and wonderful if they just incorporate socialism. And we've reached the point where that cat's out of the bag, seriously, because if it were up to millennials and kids younger, we'd have socialism tomorrow, which means in 20, 25 years, good luck with this, because kooks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are the face of the coming generations when it comes to what they know and what they don't know and what we've held back from them knowing.
Yeah, so let's talk about the single-payer health care, because those millennials who are supposed to be, paying into the system and helping out those boomers who are going to need the Medicare, they say that 55% want a single-payer health care, also referred Medicare for all, where the federal government would cover all the health care expenses of individuals. And then 56% are in support of eliminating tuition and fees at public four-year colleges and universities for students from families that make up to $125,000 per year, and making community college tuition-free for all income levels.
Wait, you see how $61,000 for Illinois now jumped to $120,000? How that doubled? Yeah.
Yep.
And once that happened, then it'd have to be $250,000 a year, right?
Well.
And I'll tell you what's going to happen. The minute universities buy into this, and they're dying to, right? Free tuition. Watch how much more expensive tuition gets.
Yeah.
When the government's paying for it, do you think it's going to stay the same? There is no, Mom, Dad, there is no commodity in America that has gone up more expensively over the last 50 years than education. You think a gallon of gas, you think a gallon of milk, you think those have gone through the roof? They're nothing compared to the cost of an American kid's education at the college and at the lower levels, but at college level in particular. Your kid's college tuition has gone up more than any other commodity in American life in the last 50 years. And once it's federalized, we're already federally underwriting most of the public colleges anyway, but once it's fully paid for, you watch, their tuition's going to triple. It's going to quadruple, because why not? Because the feds are going to pay that money. That's exactly what's going to happen. It's exactly what's we're in the process of happening now. And the irony is that all you're going to get here is bankruptcy. And once, by the way, the schools are free, then the other thing that's going to happen is the standards are going to have to lower. If everyone gets to go to school free, you can't fail half of them, right? Even though half of them won't be qualified. Probably more like 60, 70% won't be qualified for college. Once it's free, you can't tell this inner city black kid, you can't tell that rural white kid, hey, you're going to college free, here's all the money for you, here's 4 years of college tuition free. Oh, but you failed your first semester of college, so we're going to take it all away from you, because that's now racist and classist, and it's never going to happen. So what happens to the universities? They get more expensive, the taxpayers shoulder more of the burden, and you can't turn anyone away, you can't fail them, and 4 years then bleeds into 6 years because they can't get a 4-year degree in 4 years, and then graduate school, we want our highly educated doctors and lawyers and professionals, why are we charging them tuition? It's a never-ending socialistic vortex that sucks the economy under and destroys everything. But we're, 60% of the way, 60 to 70% of the way there already. We are 60 to 70% of that far along already towards full socialization of the schools. That's a staggering number. Maybe 70% there already in terms of attitude, what we're teaching kids, how we're grooming the next generation for this, all the federal money that's coming into the schools anyway, all the profiteering that you're seeing from these universities, all the mindless diversity promotion that's costing way more than actual teaching is. And we're about, again, 7 out of 10, 70% scale. We're there already. Really hard to reverse that. Once you get 51, 55, 60% who are tilted that way, particularly when they're the younger generations, it's not going to go back on its own.
See, and I would say 73%.
You would say 73%.
That's where I'm putting it.
Very
at.
technical.
And if you look at the results here, we have 56%, and 55% for these specific things that they support. And you can tell they just checked all the boxes.
Right.
You can tell 56%. So that's overall. Now, the other questions they asked was, do you support capitalism? In considering all the things that they want, only 43% support capitalism, 31% support socialism, and for the first time new this year as a category, 39% support democratic socialism.
Yeah, that's right. And that's how they're going to win these. They're going to sucker these kids in.
Yep.
By putting the adjective democratic socialism before socialism, all they're going to see is, oh, socialism for everybody. Isn't that wonderful? In the same way, they actually believe the word democratic and is a synonym for good, and the word republic or republican is a synonym for evil. Look, George Orwell was right. Whoever controls the vocabulary controls the future. And right now, we allow the left to define words. We allow the left to define every aspect of government, of economics, of history. The left controls it, so you're going to get more leftism, period.
All right.
As long as you're sending your kids to these schools, paying more and more money to do so, taking on more and more student loan for your kids to get meaningless degrees, the longer you're doing that, the more you are subsidizing America, this radical leftward turn.
And we also let the left control what it means to be a boy or a girl. Dr. Duke is going to talk with Alex Newman about what's happening in Florida.
Well, Alex, this has gone from the sublime to the ridiculous in a way. A couple weeks ago, we reported on this show, Chasco Middle School in Florida, Land O'Lakes, Florida. They actually had a middle school girl who decided she was a boy. She was immediately allowed into the boys' shower room without notifying the boys. This girl comes in, starts taking her clothes off. The boys march out of the shower room to complain to the male gym teacher, who says there's nothing he can do. Not only is the male gym teacher not able to prevent this, he is ordered by the middle school to enter the shower and watch the girl, the naked girl who thinks she's a boy, shower so that the boys don't harass her. This adult male rightly refused to go into the locker room and watch that little girl shower because, as he said, I could get sued for watching a little girl shower. Yet the high school, the middle school, rather than recognize what they were forcing this employee to do, they punished him. And now we find out a couple weeks later, Alex, in your newest article, that not only are they punishing him, but they're trying to destroy his career on the basis of the fact that he would not go watch this little girl shower. Talk to me about what's happened in the last few weeks.
This is one of those crazy stories that you almost just can't believe it's real. But, as we reported in late October, the details that you just provided, they are trying to force a male teacher to watch a 12, 13-year-old girl shower naked. We used to arrest people for this kind of thing. Then they were going to punish him by sending him to another school. Now we find out, because Liberty Counsel, which is a Christian public interest law firm that has joined on this case to help the teacher here, we find out that the officials at this school, the attorneys for the school board, the director of employee relations, they were plotting not just to remove this guy from the school and send him to another as a disciplinary measure, but to fire him and to have his teaching credentials revoked so he could never work as a teacher in the state of Florida again. That's how petty they are. And in these emails, they say that'll send a good lesson to other teachers that we won't tolerate this kind of behavior. It's absolutely sick.
Well, it's almost like something out of a Scorsese mob movie, the way they pulled this teacher aside, one of the lawyers, and threatened him. If you keep fighting us on this, we're going to we may destroy your career. We may take your teaching credential. You may never teach again. The kind of backhanded way they tried to bully this teacher, how they tried to force him to capitulate to this. Thank God he stands his ground. And thank God for Liberty, who has gotten these public requests to get these emails out there. When you read these emails amongst these administrators, they're not the least bit concerned about the boys who were traumatized, about the girl who has got obviously gender dysphoria, not about the adult male teacher who was ordered to watch a little girl shower in the name of progressive values. They're only concerned about protecting what they believe to be their progressive credentials, their politically correct bona fides when it comes to defending transgender kids' rights to do whatever they want, regardless of consequence.
That's right, and it turns out that the Liberty Counsel now has figured out that this quack psychologist, so-called, at the school has developed their transgender policy, the gender support plan, and this psychologist is being incredibly shady. Doesn't want to share what books they're loaning out to the students behind parents' back. They've got these policies that basically show clear intent with malice to deprive parents, to trample on parental rights. They want to do these things without informing parents. The guidelines specifically say that nobody should talk to parents about what their children are doing at school. They're dressing as the opposite gender or whatever the case may be. So now Liberty Counsel is saying you need to get rid of this quackery and you need to go back to common sense, where you use biological reality to define who uses what bathroom and so on and so forth. And the school, of course, is resistant. So this is a very strange situation, but I think it illustrates the broader problem that we have in the government schools across America, and that is that they are run by people whose ideology would be laughed out of the room by people with two brain cells to rub together, and yet inside this bubble in which they live, they think this is all normal and that this is how things should be. So anybody who trusts their children with these people, I think, needs to reconsider their choices.
Is the teacher fighting back? Is Liberty doing this on its own, or are they doing it on behalf of the teacher?
They're helping the teacher. They're also helping the students. Some of these boys, as you mentioned, were traumatized. Can you imagine, changing in the locker room and a girl comes in, you're like, wait a minute. It says in one of the documents that Liberty Counsel has made available that the boys were caught with their pants down, literally. That's horrifying for a little boy to have to endure something like that. And so now Liberty Counsel has taken off the cause of the parents, the little boys, and the teacher in this case. And it's far from settled. We'll have to see where this goes, but we will stay on top of it at Freedom Project, at the Newman Report. And I hope parents across the country realize this isn't just isolated to Pasco County in Florida. This kind of battle, this kind of debate is happening in your school district too.
Like you said, the most horrifying aspect of this is at every stage of this, from the moment it happened up until today, their entire premise has been to withhold from parents everything that we can keep from parents about what we're doing with their kids. Let's keep them utterly in the dark. We are ordering you as employees not to talk to each other, not to talk to the students, and not to talk to the parents whose taxes pay your salaries. That's the part that really is incomprehensible to me.
That's right. It's just horrifying on so many levels. And, just before this latest article, we had another one about a whistleblower teacher in the United Kingdom who said she actually came out to the newspaper and said, hey, the school is brainwashing, is tricking children with mental disabilities, with autism, with mental issues into believing they're the wrong gender. And she said, I can't deal with it anymore. And then they're not telling the parents what's going on. It's just incredible. I think she said there were 17 students at her school that now were claiming to be the wrong gender. And the exact same thing is happening in America. In fact, America seems to be pioneering this whole lunacy, and Europe is jumping on the bandwagon with us. But something is very, very wrong here. And parents, this is not the school that you went to 20, 30 years ago. We're dealing with altogether a different animal here. And if you're not concerned about this, you're not paying attention. Yeah,
and this is not about identifying or helping a certain small demographic of kids. This is doing everything you can to bring kids forward in the name of social experimentation and progressive gerrymandering of gender. That's all this is. It is colleges at one level and elementary and middle schools now at the other level, using their platform, their almost monopoly on how our kids are educated, to turn them into the kind of kids that they can pat themselves on the back and say, gee, how progressive are we?
Well, in addition to college being so expensive, there isn't any relief, any good news, because now you can't even work your way through college anymore. We have a column by Dr. Richard West, who is Dean Emeritus of New York University Stern School of Business, and he's a Yale alumnus. He wrote in the Wall Street Journal an op-ed that talked about his experience when he attended Yale beginning back in 1956, and how he worked a minimum wage job. He was a waiter, and by virtue of being a waiter, he was able to pay every year a sixth of his tuition costs. But now, if he would do that same job, it would cover maybe 5% of his tuition.
Well, I mean, this is the other side of the coin, right? When I said in the previous segment that we are about 70% of the way toward a full socialist education system, that's what I meant. And here's one of the side effects. Not only has the cost of education gone up with a great diminishing return in terms of preparedness, in terms of what kids actually know, in terms of their readiness to enter the workforce, not only has there been a huge gap, college tuition goes up radically, but it becomes harder and harder to pay for it. I remember 25, 30 years ago, I paid for all my college tuition. I did get some grants. I did get some money I didn't have to pay back, scholarly grants, that kind of thing, Pell Grant sort of thing. But also, I worked 40, 50 hours a week while getting my first master's degree, right? I was working 40 to 50 hours a week. I was a bartender, believe it or not. I would go to school in the day and I would bartend 6 nights a week. And believe it or not, back when I had hair, I was a little Goomba, a little Italian guy. I was not just the bartender, I was also the bouncer. They used to call me College Kid back in the bar. It was a dive, sleazy bar on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio. And there's where I sort of did my business. But I didn't take out a single student loan to do it. The one thing I disagree with this Yale scholar, he's right. It's becoming much more difficult because of the cost of tuition to be able to pay for it by working. But what he's not pointing out is that we have destroyed the work ethic in kids. We no longer have a work ethic in young kids that say they should try to pay for it. I mean, and another thing, your kids don't have to go to Yale. Right? I get it. You could work 120 hours a day and still not make enough money bartending or jello wrestling or whatever it is you want to do to be able to pay for Yale. But your kids don't have to go to Yale. They can go to cheaper schools and they can pay for it. One of my arguments is look, it's not worth going to college if it's going to get you into debt. There's no reason you should go to college if it's going to cost you $60,000 or $100,000 by the time you're done. Go intern someplace. Go work a job relentlessly for 3 or 4 years, from your 18th to your 21st year. Save $30,000, $40,000. So if you do have to go to college, you don't have to get in debt for it. Gone are the days when simply having a college degree guarantees you a job and an income that you would never have otherwise. It's not true. The average graduate from high school is what, 17 years old? The average college graduate now is 24, 25 years old, which means kids aren't getting their degrees until much later. If you spend the first 3 or 4 years after high school, just take 4 years after high school, from 17 to 21, 22, and work your butt off at some career or at some entry-level position or at some dream you want to pursue for 4 years, and you bank that money, you live at home with your parents, you bank that money, you start going to college at 21, and you're paying for the whole thing yourself without any debt, you'll be done at 25, the same age that most of these other kids are graduating with $150,000 of student loan debt. But here's the other thing. If you go to work after school and you work hard for 3 or 4 years and you save your money, most of you will realize that you don't need to go back to a 4-year college. Maybe you need a 2 years associate's degree. Maybe you just need a series of classes or a certificate. Maybe you don't need to go at all because you're paying a lot of money for something that's not going to provide much at all in terms of educational experience when it's all said and done.
And you want to add on to that, if you go right after high school and you go work a job 3 years, you may realize quickly how much you don't want to do that job for the rest of your life, and it will make you appreciate the opportunity to go to university, to be in a classroom, to get an education that much more. You will take your education much more seriously than the average 21-year-old who just got hammered last night.
You are exactly right. The best students I have ever had are the ones who took and Katie's an example of that, right? The best students I have ever had have been the ones who have walked away. The non-traditional students that come back, the 22-year-old who's got some real-world experience before they came back to school. And here's another thing, too. If you wait until you're 22, 23 and you've worked a job, even if it's a job you don't like, even if you've convinced yourself after trying for 3 and 4 years that maybe college is the place for you, you will make much wiser college choices after you had been in the workforce. The problem with our kids, they go right from high school, which is a fairy tale. They go from the time they're 5 years old to the time they're 17. They're in government public schools. And the weird socialist, crappy utopia that we force on our kids to believe in those systems. Then you immediately go right into the colleges, which are much worse in terms of the economic la-la land they live in. The kids who get lost are the ones who don't know what the world's like outside of school. And so if you can step away for a few years and figure out what happens in the real world, figure out how jobs and payrolls are met, how the sausage is made in terms of making things happen in the world, then go back to college, you'll realize really quickly you won't waste any time trying to find your major. Don't go to college if you don't know what you want to major in. Don't go to college and jumpstart 3 different majors over 2 years before you get down to business in your 4th year and you're already $100,000 in debt. And doing some work in the real world would help with that.
Okay, well, that's the Dr. Duke Show for today. Let us know about your educational experience and if you went back to college at a later year, just like me. Make sure you head over to YouTube, watch us again, and listen to us on the podcast version. Go to drdukeshow.com. You can get all the different platforms are available for the podcast.
And I know you may not believe it to look at me, but I really was. I've actually got scars on my knuckles from my bouncing days in the bar. It was a hell of a thing, studying Shakespeare and Roman history in the day and brawling with drunken sots in the evening. That was my long ago life, but hey, no student loans. And that does it for us this week on The Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you heard, please share the podcast with your friends. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.